Yay! Tonya!
Hello.
Hey! Welcome!
Thank you.
How
How are you today?
Well, I am fantastic, and how wonderful for you to be joining us. This is exciting.
Thanks.
Yay!
Here.
So you are where?
I am currently in Montana.
Fantastic. And you split your time between Montana and Tucson, is that correct?
Correct.
What a life, Tonya. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I will just go ahead and stop talking and let you do all the work now. So Metal Clay for Metalsmiths, this is Tonya Davidson.
Great. Okay, so I thought it would be interesting if I showed you how to make use of your. I just dropped it. Hold on 1 second. I gotta use my computer. I thought it would be interesting to show you how to use your dies for metal clay. So if you have any of the dies available or around that you often use for metal, let me just make sure I've got my camera. Hold on 1 second. Okay, here we go. Okay, so here is a die that is made by Israel Delgado. And I went ahead and normally you would use these shot dies with metal and a punch or in your hydraulic press. But if you're a metal clay artist, you can definitely use them for metal clay as well. So here is this X. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it closer. Oop, I just dropped it again. Let me put it in my hand. So you can definitely make tiny little components to add to your metal clay by using the dies. And it's very, very easy. And it's actually easier than if you were using traditional metals. So I also have a die here that has little anvils. And here is the little piece that I made. And what you're seeing with the yellow is AGS, or accent gold for silver. Let me change the settings just a little bit so darken it up so you can see. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit. For some reason my camera is not zooming. But there is the little handle. And then this die had some bees on it. And so I made 2 little bees, and I'll show you those. They're super sweet. So there's the one that was on the left. And you see how tiny they are. They're really small. And then here's the other bee. But it picks up a tremendous amount of detail. And then I'm going to show you how I go in and add more detail using some burr work. So then there's the final one. Hold on, I got to grab it.
Oh, can I ask a question? Can you hear me, Tonya?
Left them over on my desk by accident.
Oh, can I ask a question?
Yep.
All right, we have a couple people asking in the chat. One is, where is the die anvil from?
The die anvil was from Potter, USA. This one is a sunflower with some AGS on it as well, accent gold for silver. And then this one was also a flower, came from this mold right here. And the sunflower also came from this mold. So you can actually see the shrinkage that's occurring. Actually, that one's not from that mold, but this one is. Let me show you the comparison.
And you're using the Project X in that, is that correct?
Yes, yes I am.
Okay.
Okay, some weird panel came up. Can you guys still see me? Okay, so this one was a small flower. And what I did is I actually granulated some 24 karat gold balls in the center. And the flower I then carved a little further because it had lost a little, it didn't have quite as much texture as I'm showing here. And then I soldered it to the back plate. So what I'm going to show you today is how to roll the clay into your mold, how to remove it, cut it, and then how to go ahead and shape the edges, and then how to solder it onto your sterling silver back plate. So it's all pretty easy and quick. So let me grab that. Hold on one second. I have a panel that popped up and I'm just trying to figure out why it's there and see if I can get rid of it. Oh no, that was not it. Okay, here we go. I'm back. Weirdest things happen when you're live. Okay, so I'm gonna move this stuff out of the way so I can show you the different pieces. Get rid of my bench pen for a second. So I'm going to show you on this one, which is a butterfly die. And hold on one moment, I'm just going to see if I can get my camera to zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so this die is from Buffalo Rutland, and it's really nice butterflies. And the one thing I did want to point out is that dies that are shallow don't do as nicely as dies that are deeper. So this is a caddisfly, and it did not turn out as nicely as the other ones. And I had the piece here, and then it walked off, so I don't know what happened to it. I thought I put it in the tumbler, but it's gone. So I'm going to show you with the butterflies. Now I've got several little examples. This is this butterfly that has been fired. And I need to adjust the settings just a little bit so you can see it. Because of the light, it's difficult to see. Okay, I'm just going to turn the light off. So, and I'm going to use my tweezers because it's so tiny, it's wanting to fly off of here. So it's very small, so that's the shrinkage from it. And I made all 4 of them, so I'm going to show you how to roll the clay into the mold first. And all you need to do is get some release. And I have some really old release because I have been doing metal clay since 1996. And so all of my tools and supplies are so this is my really old stuff. I need to get some of that liberation that you guys carry. So all I do is just take a little bit of this. Hold one second. I have to see if I can reset this camera. It is not playing nicely today.
I think she might be using a sterling silver.
Technology is so much fun when it works. Okay, let me readjust the camera.
And just to let everyone know too, I've got Cameron who's going to work on answering some questions as we go here in the chat. And then I'll also be asking Tonya some of the questions too. So we'll try to get everybody's question answered. And if we don't get it now, I'm sorry, Tonya.
It's okay. I'm going to switch over to the other camera because this one is not playing nicely. So we will move over we will adapt, and then we'll put it over in my soldering station. So give me 1 second.
Okay.
Go over there. So it's luckily right next to where I'm sitting, so no big deal.
Oh, fantastic. But yeah, I'm gonna mute myself so you can't hear my background noise, but I'll just come on periodically and ask questions unless you would like me to not ask questions, and we can let people, we can answer questions later, whatever you want to do.
I can take questions anytime if somebody has a question that they would like to go over.
Well, you are.
Whatsoever.
You're awesome.
Okay. Just moving my mouse over so I can click on the camera. And I think we can see everything that's going on here. I'm going to move my firing stuff and rearrange this camera view. Hold on 1 second.
If there's something that's for her, she's wearing, yes. Where do you get the dot? So.
Okay, there we go. And then zoom in on this camera. Oh, good. Yep, there we go. Okay. All right, so here's our die, our mold, and I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of the release in there. I don't want to put too much because if you glob it in there, for some reason, that does not really pick up the texture very well. So then I'm going to open my clay, and I'm just going to use some scissors to cut what I want out of the clay. I'm not going to unwrap it.
And it looks like your picture is frozen again.
Right now it's frozen?
Okay, now it's going finally. Okay.
Okay, so I'm just going to cut it because it's already been extruded properly without the air pockets. So if I don't take it and roll it in my hands, I'm not introducing any new air pockets. I'm going to get the best texture this way. So I'm going to open this.
And while you open that, we have somebody else has joined us and asks, where do you get the dyes from?
This dye, as I said, was from Buffalo Rutland Company. You can get them from Potter or from Buffalo Rutland. And so what I'm doing is just kind of pressing it into the clay to start so I don't get any ghosting. And then I'm going to press down in the middle and give some pressure and then roll towards me and roll away from me. And that way I get a really nice, pristine roll. And I don't really want the thickness in the back, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to get my sheet out, my non-stick setting mat, which I have had for years and years and years. So as I said, I started with metal clay in 1996. And I was a senior teacher, one of the first 6 senior teachers for art clay back in the day. And then I was a senior teacher for PMC Connection. I'm going to put on my visor so I can see what I'm doing. And I was a senior teacher for PMC Connection, and then I was a senior teacher for Rio for 10 years. So I also owned a jewelry tool and supply company for 10 years called Whole Lot of Whimsy. And we sold over 3,800 different items that were made for metal clay. And I've been a metalsmith for 30 years. So I primarily work in sterling silver and gold now. And I find this is a fascinating way to add texture to your work and components, 3D components, without a lot of work, without a lot of extra tools or work, and being able to produce something so beautiful that, let me pick up the other piece, hold on 1 second, that has so much texture and it's so easy. I didn't have to cast it, I didn't have to sprue it, I didn't have to go use my press, I didn't have to do a lot of extra work to get these beautiful raised impressions that are so detailed. So, and I'm kind of unorthodox, so I'm going to show you some techniques that I do to pieces that, here, this camera is focusing in much better, so you'll be able to see all the detail. And this is so tiny, it fits on my feet. You can see, kind of see all of that that's in that piece, which is really phenomenal. So the first thing I would do is I would take this to the dehydrator. I have a Nesco dehydrator, and I would put that in there. I've had really good luck with this clay, Project X clay, not warping in the dehydrator when I dry it that way. So I just stick it in there on a piece of Teflon paper and let it dry. And when that's done, kind of like the cooking show since we don't have hours, when that's finished, then I have a piece that looks like this. So I'm going to show you how I clean it up. And you can either, I did it two ways. You can either clean it up in the greenware stage, or you can clean it up fired. So I want to show you, the sunflower was done that way, and this one has been fired already, and I clean it up the exact same way with the exact same tools, and I'm going to show you how to do that on this next step. Okay, so hold 1 second while I get my bench pen. And the only problem, yep, go ahead.
I'm going to throw in a question. We have a couple of people want to know, are you going to talk about how you apply the gold?
No, it's just AGS that's been painted on, and so that's a whole nother technique, if you will, and a class in itself. But it's a paint-on product, so you take it and use distilled water and you paint it on. So it's very easy. And then you just torch fire it. So I am going to show you how I torch fire. Now, the only issue that I am now having, because that camera did not work, is that I can't use my flex shaft because it's at the other bench, and I need to show you how I file this. So, can we take a 2-minute break and talk about the product while I go see if I can find a way to reactivate this camera or switch it out for a different time?
Oh yeah, of course.
That will probably be the easiest way to do this, because I won't be able to use the flex shaft if I don't, or I can run and get my micro motor. That would also work, because I do want to show you a really innovative way to file your greenware that is super easy and fun. So give me 1 second.
Cameron, do you want to bring the other? Let's see.
Okay, so while Miss Tonya does that, I'm going to tell you all the different ways that Project X comes out. So I do have a couple right here, but we'll go online and we can do the other. So this one is Project X, the 99 silver metal clay, and what's great is it can be torch fired or kiln fired. All right? So again, Tonya, can you hear me?
Yes, but go ahead and mute me for a second, okay?
You have to mute you.
I have to mute myself? Okay,
Yeah.
I'll mute myself.
I'm so sorry. No, you're fine. Hey, we're figuring this out as we go. It's all good. Okay, so then. Oh, I see the studio dog in there too. All right, so then we've got the Project X Flex, and this comes in two different ones. You've got the Flex that is fine silver, the 999, and then you have the Flex, which is the 960 sterling silver, right? And now this, the sterling silver, the 960, can only be kiln fired, all right? But fine silver, the 999 flex, can be torch or kiln fired. And we also have the water paste. This is what I use when I'm working in my glass beads. I actually create a little stringer that I have painted with the water paste. And then I'll use that as I'm making a bead to go in there, and I'm melting the stringer and the torch, and I'm creating designs and stuff. Oh, Tonya, are you ready? Oh, fantastic. So again, we'll go back and talk about all the different kind of clays. You can find that all on Clay Revolution. All right, back to Miss Tonya.
Okay, So can you hear me now?
Yes,
We're all
ma'am.
good. All right, I have no idea what happens with technology, but it's working again now, so we'll see how this goes. So I want to show you, I'm going to be using my flex shaft, and you can also use a Dremel. This is one of my favorite tools right here. I'll probably be buried with it. That's my joke. It is a carbide tungsten rotary file available at Rio Grande. If you go to my Instagram, you'll find a link for it. It's in the Story Archives under Tool Recommendations. But it is one of my most favorite tools, and it's essentially a handmade, a handheld rotary file. What I'm holding the piece in is called a Nipex wrench, and it's from Germany. It's the 125 is the model number, and if you go to my website under Tonya Recommends, you'll find a link for it. The nice thing about this is it's a parallel jaw. It puts no pressure on the work, so I'm not going to crush or break or crack my greenware, metal clay, and it's got very small head, so it will hold even the smallest things. So I'm going to put the piece in here, and then I'm going to come in with my flex shaft, and I'm going to put my middle finger on the flex shaft stem, and I'm going to come in and just sand all that extra clay off. Take a deep breath after I did all that. Technology gave me a rush there with all those issues, and then I just continue along. Here, let me grab this one. Okay, put my visors back on. So I come in and I just hit the edges, I hit the top, and I sand all of those areas, just like that. And I continue to sand. And then when I want to get into tiny little grooves, then I switch from that tool to this tool, which is a tiny square cone burr. Okay, so I'm going to put that in my flex shaft and put my optivisors back down, and I can come in and get into the tiny little areas where they have their antenna, and I can come into the sides. I'm going to make sure I'm in camera and you can see me. And I'm just filing little tiny grooves and adding those indentations like I did on the other butterfly, this one. So that's how I added all those tiny little marks in there. And that's how I carved out the sides. And you can do this after you fire the piece or in the greenware stage. And then, let me back out just a little bit because it looks a little tiny blurry.
And can you tell us the name of the pliers one more time, please?
Yep, they're Nipex. K-N-I-P-E-X. And I've only broken one piece ever, and that was the one I just broke because I hit it with my Fordham. So you don't want to hit anything with your tools while you're working with them because that will break the greenware, as you know. So when I have gotten all the edges done, then I will switch to a different burr, which is called a lens cutter burr. And it's very tiny. This is a 1 millimeter tiny lens cutter burr. They're sometimes called knife edge burrs. And I'll show you how I put in extra texture. So then I'll come in. And so this line is a little faint right here. Let me zoom in so you can see that. And I'm going to rotate over just a little bit so I'm in focus. Okay. So now I can come in and I can actually add texture into the piece. I could use a small, like 0.5 millimeter ball burr, and the camera just froze. I think this camera is very unhappy. Okay. So I can come in and I can add some texture with these burrs to add some design elements. And I'm going to use my little watchmaker brush. And you can see that I've added a bunch of lines in there. So you can add lines. You can come in with a ball burr. So this is a tiny 0.5 millimeter ball burr. And I can come in and add, so this is to me way faster than getting out those tiny little files, or even using my X-Acto knife. And I can add in lines and depth and balls to create all sorts of interesting lines in the whatever shape I'm doing. So on the anvil, for example, or even on this piece, it's easier to see on the finished pieces because they've been fired and patinaed. You can see there's all those fine little lines in there. And that will be, you'll see all that, especially after it's fired because of the shrinkage. So it adds a lot to the dimension. So the different burrs that I'm using or have used here is the tungsten carbide from Rio, which is the green collared one. And then I've also used the square tapered cone burr, the lens cutter, and then tiny little ball burrs. So all of the pieces that I did in here, let me just put them in here so you can see them. Pick them up with some tweezers. So I've got this wonderful little bee. I think you can see all the little detail, even getting in between his antenna. So I'm getting that detail in there. There. And then even getting into the cross, which I've already applied some of the AGS and fired that on, but I haven't burnished it yet. And then the little tiny bee, which is even smaller than all the other ones. I put in a whole bunch of detail on his body. So I'll take some pictures later and post these so you can see them. But then I prepare my piece that I'm going to use for the pendant or the sterling silver. So this has been sawn out, filed, and then I applied fairy dust and fused that to the surface. So now I am ready to take my piece and fire it and then solder it onto this piece. So the piece that we're going to fire is over here. So I'm going to show you two pieces because we're doing like a cooking show. So this is the one that's ready to go. I have filed, sanded him, and added a whole bunch of texture to him with my burrs. So those dots that you see in there, that's a ball burr. All the edges are sanded and filed using that tungsten carbide. And I've also then taken the cone burr and put in all the little tiny detail into the sides and edges to make him ready to go. So now we're going to go over to the soldering camera and I'm going to show you how to solder him. Then once he's soldered, he's going to look something like this one. So this is the bee, and this one has been fired, and I'm going to solder this for you, show you how to solder metal clay and prep it onto a back piece. And I had put this little bee here, and last night I soldered on some little 24 karat gold balls. So those are soldered, and how I did that is I made 4 little tiny divots with a ball burr, and I used very, very small pieces of solder, put those in the divot, brought them up to flow temp, and then I placed the gold on top of the solder so that they would sit directly and sink into those divots. So they're ready to go. So I'm going to end up showing you how to solder this onto the piece after I show you how to fire this piece. So let's go over. Any questions so far about how easy it is to roll it out, take it out, dry it, and then use your burrs to create texture and definition without using any hand files?
Well, we did have a question. What is fairy dust?
Oh, it's just your filings. So I save all of the filings from my bench. I put it through on Instagram. I have a whole reel on how to do this, how to clean your filings. But I put my filings through a sifter. Then I demagnetize them to get out all my iron filings and all the things that could contaminate it. And then I fuse it onto the surface of the metal. So this one has had that fired onto the surface. This one as well has had some this one does not have any fairy dust. This one has fairy dust. So that's kind of what it gives you, a really beautiful texture in the background. And the caddisfly that I can't find has that texture as well. I had prepared that whole piece to show you guys another example, but it has disappeared off my bench. So I will go find it after class and post a picture of it. So I'm going to switch cameras over to the soldering bit and show you how to fire this with the torch. Everyone's got a torch. Every metalsmith has a torch. If you don't have a kiln, I have plenty of kilns. I have 8 kilns, but I'm not going to use it for this demo. So I'm going to switch over and show you how to really quickly and easily torch fire.
And we do have a question that wanted to know, is it true that the heat from soldering does not affect the AGS?
It does not, because I don't use pizza solder. I use medium or hard solder, and in all of these situations, for example, I'll just show you this piece. So the sunflower, actually the ring is soldered on. The back has an etched pattern of flowers on the back, and then I patinaed it and polished it back. It looks like I need to do a little bit better job of polishing on the back side because I can see my polishing marks, but you get the idea. I did that before class. And then metal hot enough to move the solder. If you're concerned about the solder moving and you want some what I call extra insurance, the best thing you can do is get yourself some water-based whiteout. And water-based whiteout is very safe to use. And then put that around the areas that have already been soldered, and it will protect those areas and it won't flow. And then before I stick it in the pickle pot, I just throw it in a little jar of acetone that helps to remove the liquid, the water-based liquid whiteout, which there is a link to buy some on my Tonya Recommends page if you want to find it easy, because it is harder to find the water-based, and you can't find it in any store. You have to order it. They don't carry it in stores. But you don't really need to do it. I did not do it with this piece, had no issues. You have to be in control of your torch heat and be looking for the color of your metal so you don't go too far when you are torch firing. So let's torch fire this little bee. Is he blurry? Is it just my eyeballs? Oh no, he looks good. Okay, and I'm going to turn the light off so that you can see a little bit better what's happening. And I've got a timer on my watch, which I find my watch really super helpful because I can just click that and then hit start, and that way I am timing myself and being safety concerned. That's a good reminder to tie back our hair when we are using the torch or using any kind of equipment. So let me turn my torch on. Okay, and we don't need it super hot. I'm using the, let's see, I'll go this way. I'm using the Little Hottie from Pepe Tools with my Sterno can. And I'm just going to come in and gently warm it up. This is the point where you really don't want to go too fast, too hard with the Project X clay when you're burning the binder out, because if you do, you might get some warping. But the great news is, even if you get a little bit of warping during this burnout phase, you just take it to your steel block with a nylon hammer and gently tap it, and it will not change your texture, and it'll flatten it back out. And I usually do that anyway so I'm going to start my timer. And I do that anyway because I wanted to make sure it's really super flat before I solder it to my back plate. So I'm trying to keep it, and you just saw that it kind of pulled up a little bit, so it is warping just a little bit, and that's okay. I'll just tap it back down with my nylon hammer, and I'll show you how I do that. So I'm just heating it up, and I don't want it to get too bright orange. I'm trying to control the heat by like flicking it around it a little bit. So I'm in and out, because when you hit the piece with the torch and you pull back, pull in and out, or float around, float up and down with your hand, that is actually going to help you regulate the heat so you don't go too far, too fast, too hot. So it's just watching the color. I want that low orange glow, and I'm just keeping my eye on the low orange glow. And then when it gets past the low orange glow, I pull back a little bit so I don't get it so hot. This is the same way that I fire the accent gold for silver, the AGS. I prefer AGS over the Aura 22 because AGS is a brighter, orangier gold color. It's a richer gold color in my opinion. And I feel like there's too close of a color difference with the Aura, and when you polish your silver up, it kind of gets lost. So now we're almost at 2 minutes. I want to make sure we go all the way. And then I'll show you just how I tap it. And you can see how much it's shrunk. Gotten quite a bit smaller. And the reason why I love this little Silkwar board is on the turntable is I can keep turning the piece, so I'm making sure that all sides of the piece are getting equal heat. It's really important that when you're torch firing, since it's not in a kiln, that you are regulating the temperature of that clay, making sure all the binders are burning out and the molecules are centering together. Okay, we're a little over 2 minutes, and I know the instructions say 2 minutes, but I like to go a little bit longer because I have a saying, how you do anything is how you do everything, and I overdo everything. So I engineer everything so I never have to see a piece come back from a customer. I want to make sure it's really well done, all the solder joints are good, and that there's no way that I'm going to have to repair anything later. Okay, so I think we're good. I'm going to turn that off. And then I'm going to pick up my piece, and I don't quench it right away. I put it onto a steel block, and I let the steel block pull the heat out of the piece first, because if you put a very hot piece of metal in water, you can introduce bubbles into the metal. And especially with metal clay, because it's so porous, it can create issues. So I just want to kind of get it to the point that it's not super hot. Then I'm going to quench it, so I've quenched it now. And I'm going to turn around and show you on my forming block how easy it is to just all right. Let me adjust the head. And then all you do is take and tap it. And that's enough. This is just a Delaware hammer or a nylon hammer, and tap it. And now it's perfectly flat and it's ready to be soldered onto the piece. All that detail. Okay, so now I'm going to switch back to the soldering bench. And I'm going to show you how to solder the piece on. Is there any questions so far? One thing I do want to show you that's really important is that metal clay has some issues sometimes with soldering because it's a porous metal. So how I combat that, so this is the piece that's been fired, that I just fired. So how I combat this is I put it back in my 9-pex pliers, and I get a burnishing tool. So I have several burnishing tools that are made by Bush. You can get them from AutoFry or Rio. I have a coupon code for AutoFry and Rio both if you want to save some money, but all three of these are carbide burnishers, and I use them in my flex shaft. So let me show you how I do that. So I just put it in my flex shaft. And let me put this here in my optimizer so I can see, or my mega views. And then I just come in and I burnish like so. And what that's doing is closing all the pores of the metal so that when I solder, the solder does not go into the metal clay, but instead does what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to solder the two parts together. Okay, so you can see that I already did that with the B. Let me give you a close-up view. So they're both done. See how shiny they are on the back? So I've essentially compressed all the molecules and made it so that it's going to solder easier and faster. So I used this one, which is my favorite burnisher. It's got like a little bullet head on the top. And just went in and burnished with pressure and speed of the rotary tool. Okay, now I'm going to go over to my soldering bench. And I'm going to show you how to solder these onto your piece. So we're going to take this one, which is ready to go, and I'm going to end up putting that B on that one. And I'm going to put this one over here and flip it over. There we go. Okay. So you could use your butane torch. I am now going to use my Swiss torch because I have a little bit more finessing control for soldering with this. I am going to be using Rips Flux, and I'm going to be using medium solder, and the solder is held in a piece of tubing. If you go to my Instagram, I have a whole bunch of instructions on how to do this, but the reason why I do it is it gives me the ultimate control over my stick solder. So the tubing, which is made out of brass, holds the solder so that I can use it like a pencil. So I don't have to put it in cross-lock tweezers and worry about it flipping around and burning my arm or hurting me anyway. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my piece where you can see it. Let me center this a little bit better. And I can zoom in a little bit more. She has a torch lit in her hand and she's moving cameras and mouses. What can we not do? Okay, so I've got that.
So I'm going to just let you know, I can no longer hear, or I can't hear you in my audio. So just keep talking. You're on your own. I'm sorry I can't answer any questions, but just keep going, Tonya, okay?
Okay, you can hear me though, or you cannot hear me? Can anyone hear me?
I mean, everybody else can hear you, but my computer is frozen. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you for explaining that. Okay. So what I'm going to do is come in, and I've now Prips fluxed it, and I'm heating it. So that's got flux on it, as you can see. And I'm going to apply the solder to the little B. So I'm going to get it up to temperature. And I'm watching for the flux to go clear, and then I'm going to touch down my solder to the piece. I'm going to get a little bit more over here. The key to using stick solder is to not put the flame on the solder. Your flame is on the piece, not on the solder. If you stick your torch tip on head or flame onto the solder, it will just melt into a ball and make a mess. So what I've done is on this silkware board, these ridges here act as a heat nest. So it allows me to bounce the heat underneath it and to pull that solder. And I'm just kind of lining it up where I think it looks good. And so I want that tail with the 4 balls to be its path. So now I'm going to come in and go round and around and around and heat around it. I'm going to grab a titanium pick. Usually I prefer to use my Pepe Tools or Easy Ergo, but I don't see it immediately available, so I'm using a different one. And I just have this in case I need to touch something down. So we're all soldered there, we're all soldered there, and I'm going to pull back a little bit so you can see, because I had to move it, so it's all soldered there, so we're completely soldered. So I'm going to pick this up and show it to you. Soldered all the way around. Solder did not flow out. just around where I wanted it. That's all I did. I did not focus the heat on the bee itself. I went around and around and around. So for example, just I'll show you with my tweezers, I'm focusing the heat around the bee like this. And it just went, there we go. So around and around this way. Okay, so that's what I need to do. So this piece is completely done. Let's go ahead and solder this one. This will be our last one. And I'm going to do the same thing with this butterfly. I'm going to end up, so I've already Crips flexed it, but I'm going to end up putting some dots on there of where he's been flying. So I'm just going to heat this till, oh, you need to see, you guys, they're not in focus. Okay, there we go. Move it over there. I'm going to move my camera just a little bit. There, so I can see what I'm doing and you can see me. Okay, so I'm going to heat this till the Crips Flux flows clear. And then I'm just going to touch down the piece because solder flows to heat and solder follows heat and melts with the temperature of the metal, not the actual torch. So now this whole back piece is completely coated in solder. Shoot.
And we had a question, were you using medium solder?
I'm using medium stick solder. Okay, so I'm going to turn my little butterfly around, and I think I'm going to put him there because I want to have like a trail of where he flew here with beads later. And again, I'm going to circle my heat around here, and I'm actually going to zoom out because when I turn the torch or the turntable, I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm just going to come in. I've got my pick in my hand in case I need to use it. I'm coming around and around. You can do this with a butane torch. You can do it with this is an oxygen propane torch called the Swiss torch. So I'm just heating up the metal because solder flows to the heat. So I don't need to focus the heat on the piece, just around the piece. And as I heat up this side right here, the solder will flow to this side. And I'll see it come out the side. And then same thing with the other side. And I'm just checking. I want you guys to be able to see this. I'm putting it back in the camera. Just checking to make sure the solder has flown on this side. Okay. And then checking the other side. Okay, we're all soldered. So, let me just pick this piece up and show you. I'm going to put it down on the brick for just a second, or onto my kiln, or onto my steel block, sorry. And then show you the solder piece. So as you can see, the Crips Flux really protects the metal. So I can continue to do several more soldering operations on this piece before I have to pickle it. So I'm going to go ahead and drill my ball holes, my divots. I'm going to put some solder in there. And then I'm going to flow the solder in the divot holes, and then I'll put my little balls in there. And then I can come back and add some AGS and torch fire that again. And there will be nothing that happens to the solder as long as I can control the heat of the AGS on there. Okay, so I'm going to bring these over to the other bench so you can see them. Let me quench that one. Okay, so there's this finished piece. And then this one. So I'll just throw these in the pickle, and then I'll throw them in the magnetic finisher, and then I'll burnish them back up with my little bullet point and finish them with some burrs. And the burrs that I like to use for polishing are the Identa Top Swiss Star red and green, and then this is the extra polishing shofu, and I use that to take off patina. And that's how I get the sunflower. That's how I finished this. So it wasn't finished in a tumbler or anything like that. It was hand finished. So it's really super simple. I made all of the pieces that you see, and I probably made 6 or 7 pendants in about an hour and a half, start to finish. And that's pretty fast because if I was using my, and because I didn't have to enrich the metal to put the gold on it, that saved me a bunch of steps because fine silver automatically takes the AGS so much easier than sterling does. Sterling, you have to take extra steps to enrich the metal before you can apply the AGS. So it just cuts down on some of the time of working in the piece. And I really love that. I felt like this was a huge advantage to the project itself.
And
So,
we do-
are you still there?
yes, can you hear me?
You're cutting in and out.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna try to ask, can you put pieces with AGS into the tumbler? No. Okay.
Are there any questions? I don't know if you'll be able to talk or
Can,
So the problem is,
Am I gonna do this from, do I need to be special or can I just do this from the phone?
do it. It's just that we gotta.
Are you able to like go in the middle and say?
I'll get
hear you if you're talking to me. I'm not sure. I'm not saying anything, but I'm just showing some pieces. See if you can reconnect. So as you can see on this piece, I'll have very little cleanup. I just need to pickle it and then toss it into the magnetic finisher for if I want a bright shiny finish, or I'll use some 3M wheels and then I'll use my Identa Top Swiss Star polishers and then I'll use the burnisher and all that. So not a lot of extra work that needs to be done. And then on this one again, after I'll go ahead and drill the holes for those balls and then throw the solder in there and solder those on.
If you want these, they're in the red.
I think I lost. I don't even know if anyone's there anymore. It says attendees 40, but I don't know if anyone's there, if you guys can see me or hear me, and there's no host, so I don't know what to do. I think I'll wait till she comes back on. If you have any questions, you can always go online and send me a message. In Instagram, you can DM me or you can send me one on Facebook, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have about anything that I did or covered during this demo. But as you can see, there's a whole lot of possibilities in using the dyes from metal clay in combination with sterling silver or gold, either one.
Okay, raffle number 1. Vehicle bag.
Just to let y'all know.
go outside.
Hey.
Oh, I hear you now.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. Okay, I'm actually on my phone right now, so.
Hey, we're doing
kind of fill time while you were gone.
You
and
you did fabulous. Your work is incredible, Tonya.
Oh, thank you.
I'm trying to see.
Can anybody see video? Can you see video? Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, fantastic. So just to let you know, we have about 3 minutes. Is there anything else that
we need to talk about? Again, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear anything for a little bit.
Oh, no, I just kind of went over the process again and steps again, and I'm happy to answer any questions if somebody has any in chat. Are there any other questions that you'd like to answer?
I am. There's my chat. Thank you, Tonya.
Thank you. Will there be a list of supplies and tools used? And I think you mentioned something about your Instagram
page.
Yeah, I filmed yesterday the process of using the burrs on here, so I will post that with the burrs that I used on my Instagram page. So you'll have another video of this and how it worked, so you can see it up close, because when you're able to control things a little bit better than live, it goes much easier. So I'll post that probably tonight or tomorrow. And if you have any questions, you can always look there. And then if you look in my tool recommendations under Story Archives, you'll find all the links to the burrs that I use, and you'll see them in there.
And someone had asked, are we recording? We are doing our best to record, and hopefully we'll be able to put this on Play Revolution and post everything. But again, there were some technical difficulties, so fingers crossed, everything is being recorded. So, Tonya, you've been amazing. Is there anything to add before we say goodbye to you?
No, it's really nice. You know, I started in Metal Clay in 1996, and then and I had a jewelry toy supply company, and with my business partner, who's my mother, got cancer and ended up dying. And so I had to hire a bunch of people to replace her, and my father was working for us at the time. And then he got brain cancer, so I ended up closing down a whole lot of websites because I just couldn't take care of my parents and also my family and also run a business. And it was during the time period people were not able to get loans, 2012, when they were not giving out loans because of the recession. So even if you qualified. So it's been a while since I did metal clay, and this was really fun. I was very impressed with the Project X clay. It has a very nice texture to it. I was so used to using PMC for so many years, and it actually seemed drier when I first used it. PMC seemed drier than the Project X clay. But I did notice that after I roll it out the first time, I really do need to, take care of it, put it into the saran wrap, mist it. I think I misted it with distilled water, but I think that they have a product that would probably be better. And then, put it in my clay container that I'm using. So I did use used clay to make some of the molds that you saw, some of the pieces that you saw. And anytime I had even like a tiny little crack after it dried, all I did was take my rubber tool, my little, I don't know if they still sell these or not because I've had them forever. We used to sell these, but they're just little rubber clay shapers. And in my little dish that I have here, I just wet some of the clay, and then I would rub it into the cracks, and they just went away, and it was so easy. And then I used those burrs to clean it up. And just as a little tip, this is a shofu wheel, and it's normally used on metal as like a last step for polishing. I actually used it to polish this piece as a final sanding step. And so I went in and I was able to create, correct and fix all of the curves on this shape because it has like a very rounded curve and square ends. And it also burnished it at the same time and made it bright, shiny silver without being fired. It hadn't been fired yet. And so then I fired it, and then I applied the AGS and fired it again. And I plan on doing another 1 or 2 coats of AGS on this after I clean it up, and then I'll solder it onto a piece. So don't be afraid of using your metal smithing tools on metal clay. You just want to use the finest ones. So you could be using the shofu wheels, you could be using the Adenta wheels, but I wouldn't use the blue or the ones that are darker, that are more abrasive. I would use the finer tips ones. So I tried to stick with all my metals smithing tools when I was doing this project as a way to push myself and experiment with combining metal smithing with metal clay. And that way I didn't have to buy any tools. I didn't buy, I already had those sanders and things that Carrie shows in her videos of what you'll need as a starter kit, but I have put those in storage. So I wanted to see if I could use my burrs just on low speed with a light touch. Using the Knipex wrench which I was shocked that the Knipex wrench didn't crack or break the pieces. And then to go in with those tiny burrs and get into all those little tiny grooves like that. I mean, I'm pretty astounded that I was able to carve those little curves with that tiny cone burr. And no files. I didn't have to use the files on any of these pieces that you're seeing. And it is really exciting. And just really quick, if we have a few minutes,
Unfortunately, to get ready for the next speaker, we gotta go. But please, just keep experimenting, playing, and keep posting on Instagram, and we will follow you, girl.
Yep. So I would have done it the same way on this piece that's already been fired. So you can either do it after firing or before firing. Either one. It's both equally the same. So go out and experiment. Try your dyes, try your clay and your metalsmithing tools. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that you can use both for your projects.
And I just want to say thank you again, the amazing Tonya Davidson. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you.
Have a great day.
Bye.